Hello, welcome. I'm Michelle Swan Young, and I'm talking a lot in this sort of a series about why it's so important for us as parents to cultivate a sense of calm, to be able to come back to a connection with ourselves as we engage with our kids and parent them, so that we can parent from our deepest values instead of our immediate frustrations. Today, I want to talk about how coming back to calm helps us access the creativity that we need to solve problems, especially complex problems that have relational components that have to do with our kids. Truly, this is actually helpful for solving problems with just about anyone, but we'll talk about it in the context of kids today. So first of all, I think it's really helpful to understand just a really simple model of how our brains are structured and how they work. And this model is from Dr. Dan Siegel. It's just the hand model of the brain. And we're going to use our fist today to represent just a very rudimentary model of the brain. So if you put your thumb underneath your fingers like this, I invite you to do this yourself because it can be really helpful in sort of embodying what we're doing here. And we think about our wrist here. This is like the brain stem. And the thumb here is representative of the limbic system. And these sections are the very primitive parts of our brain, but they're also the emotional parts of our brain. And they have the quickest and most direct access to impulses that we might act out. They are involved in the stress response. Now, when we put our fingers right over the top here, this part is representative more of our thinking, logical brains. It's called the prefrontal cortex. And when we're in a calm response, for at least mostly, right? We're not in a massively stressed out response. You can still experience some stress and still be very connected and in control. But when we're in mostly a calm response in our bodies, our brains are all connected, just like this. Everything is working together, so our whole brains are working together here. But when something happens that elicits a really strong stress response, what can happen is what Dr. Dan Siegel says or calls flipping our lids. So we've flipped our lids. Our kids can do this too. Anyone can do it. And this hand model shows, obviously our brains itself are not doing this, but it's showing the connection or the disconnection in this case. So our prefrontal cortex up here has kind of gone offline, and our limbic system and our brain stem are really controlling everything that's happening for us right then. We're not able to rationally think things through. We're not able to consider our actions very well and what might happen because of them. We are simply in this very volatile reactionary state. However, we can help ourselves if we can notice, which of course requires a little bit of prefrontal cortex just to notice. Notice if we're here, and we can use things that will help to bring this back down and bring it back into this state where we can have a little bit more rational thought. We can use our whole brains rather than just these reactionary limbic and brainstem parts that are very emotional. We can start to bring in that rationality and the thinking through and the taking our time parts and really engage, like I said, our whole brains. We don't want to just use the logic because that is not our whole brain either. But when we use the whole thing itself, it can really, it helps us to be able to engage in that problem solving so much better. So when we can come back to that calmer state, we can start to think through our decisions. We can start to collaborate with our kids. In a stress response, we get a really narrow focus, but a calm response allows us to open back up and consider maybe our kids' perspectives. We might be able to empathize a little more with them. We can think through those outcomes, whether it might be a positive outcome or a negative, or maybe both in certain situations, and really start to strategize, problem solve, listen, yeah, it's a much more open state and a much more logical state. So let me give you an example. Let's just say your child is playing with either a friend or a sibling, and they have a toy that they're playing with, and they're really struggling to share it. And let's just say your child gets so frustrated they end up flipping their lids, and they yell, they snatch the toy away, they run down the hall into the bathroom, shut the door, and lock it. Okay? They have flipped their lids. They are not in a state where they can think about what they're doing. They have just had a full-blown stress response. Their brain looks like this. The connections in their brain look like this, right? So you have noticed this as their parent, and you have some options right now. You could also flip your lid. So maybe you are really frustrated that your child has been unkind to their sibling or friend, and you just feel these emotions rising up in you, and you get to choose. You can either just let them keep going and drive your response, and maybe you would do basically the same thing they did. Maybe you would go over to the bathroom, yell through the door, tell them it was absolutely not okay for them to do that, demand they open the door. When they finally do, you snatch the toy away and you put it away and stomp off. That's pretty much exactly what your child did, and you have just done the same thing. Now, if you do that, you have taken care of an immediate threat. The threat was that your child was in a really strong stress response state, and you needed to make sure that they no longer had access to that toy. So you have taken care of the threat, you've taken control of the situation, and you shut down the interaction. However, you have not modeled very much about how to manage situations like this to your child. You certainly haven't modeled emotional control or emotional intelligence, and you're also not in a place to teach them or walk them through different options for problem solving with their friend or sibling that they were playing with. So, second option, right? So your child has flipped their lid, they have run, yelled, grabbed the toy, run into the bathroom, locked the door. You have an option to take a pause here. You might feel all of these feelings welling up inside you. You might feel so frustrated and angry that, again, your child still can't figure out how to share this toy. But you are the adult, and you might have had some experience and some practice in emotional regulation. And so you may take a nice deep breath. You might remind yourself that this moment that your child is having is not a reflection on how good of a parent you are, and it's not a reflection on how good of a child they are either. They are just having a hard time. You might let your child have a moment to calm down in that bathroom by themselves, and you might check in on the sibling or the friend and see how they're doing, and just let them know that you are going to work with your kid on the situation at hand. Then maybe you would knock on the door and say, "Hey, I noticed you're feeling upset. What's up?" And then let's just say in this scenario, your child opens the door and is willing to talk to you. That doesn't always happen. Let's just say it does. So they might be really frustrated, and they might tell the story of how their friend was really unfair to them. But instead of telling them why that's wrong, maybe you could validate their feelings. Don't validate necessarily their story, because that may or may not be actually true, but you can validate how they're feeling. You might help them calm down. You could help them with different calming practices that you might know or have worked with them on, or maybe have worked through yourself. And then when they're ready, you could guide them through the problem-solving process, not from knowing how it should turn out yourself, but really with curiosity and with openness to how your kid and their sibling or friend might want to solve the problem. And let me tell you, my kids have solved problems in ways that I would have never dreamt of, because they actually know what their issues are and they know what their concerns are in situations that they might not be able to verbalize to me all the time. And so sometimes they solve problems in ways I just would never have imagined, and I certainly wouldn't imagine it would work, and it does. So that is the second scenario that you could choose for helping to solve this problem. You've helped solve the problem for yourself because you've calmed yourself down so that you can be there for your child and actually have this difficult circumstance and their experience of these really big emotions become a tool for learning. So they'll learn both emotional regulation and also that they can learn this creative problem solving process so that they know that they don't have to just resort to anger and flipping their lid to be able to get their needs met. That second option is so much more work and it requires so many more skills, but it also teaches so many more skills to our children. It helps them to become resilient, kind, empathetic, well-functioning adults eventually when we really take that time. So I wanted to give you that example so that you could see how when we're able to calm ourselves, then we can come to a situation that either we might need to solve problems with or we might need to help our children solve problems. We can come to that situation with so much more creativity, so much more openness, and really engage more when we have come back to that calm and that connection with ourselves. If you need some help in figuring this out, I would love to invite you to take my course called Discovering Calm, A Parent's Guide to Simple Tools for Keeping Your Cool. And it goes through this, like taking a pause and helping to calm yourself and then being able to kind of shift your perspective so that you can re-engage. And also the first part would be becoming aware that you're even experiencing that in the first place. The link is down in the description for this video, but maybe right now you could just tell it or remind yourself of just one thing you might do the next time you do start feeling those emotions bubbling up inside you when something is going on with your kid, but you're going to need to problem solve so that you can bring yourself back to that state of calm and connection with yourself and engage in that really open and curious creative problem solving. All right, if this has helped you, I'd love for you to press like on this video and subscribe if you want to. I hope you have a wonderful day and take good care.